congratulations as well for you guys being out here this morning. We'll give second service a hard time for those that overslept. I have to admit that I remembered just a few moments before I went to bed last night, so I could have been one of those people that show up at second service. So, hey, I haven't spoke for a couple weeks, so are you guys ready for a joke? All right, okay. And this is some joke that somebody submitted. You hear about the son who passed his driver's education course, and he goes to his father and asks his dad if he could borrow the car, and the dad responds, "Tell you what, son, if you get your grades up, you begin to read the Bible every day, and if you will cut your hair, and I'll let you borrow the car." So the son brings up his grades. He begins to read the Bible daily, and so he goes to his dad. He said, "Dad, can I borrow the car? I've done what you asked me to do. I brought my grades up, been reading the Bible daily." And the father said, "You know what? I have noticed you brought your grades up. I have noticed that you're reading the Bible every day, but I see that you failed to cut your hair." Son responds, "Well, as a result of reading the Bible, I found out Moses had long hair, Samson had long hair, Jesus had long hair," which the father replied, "Yes, that's true, but they walked everywhere." All right. Hey, that was one that one of you guys submitted, so anyway. All right. Well, we are starting, as Larry said, we're starting a brand new series today called Life on Mission. And I'm just so excited about the series going into Easter. And you know, I'm sure we all remember that old TV series called Mission Impossible, or the more recent Mission Impossible movies. And you remember how they would always use this recording to tell the agent, you know, that special secret mission they were asking them to do. And remember at the end of that recording, they said, you know, your mission, should you choose to accept it, then they would tell the mission and then self-destruct. You know, in reality, we all have a mission. Whether we know it or not, we are living it out. And your actual life mission is simply where you focus your life. And your life mission can be identified with really what your life revolves around. And I'm a word picture guy, and I came up with this. If I can get you guys to put it up on the screen. Okay, for some people, it's their job. You know what I'm talking. You know where I'm going with this. Everything revolves around their job, man. Their family time, their involvement in the community, their involvement in the church. Their whole focus is their job. And a problem comes when maybe the economy changes, or maybe they're laid off, or they retire, and their whole focus, their whole life has been that job. Many times, people actually, statistics show, studies show, particularly with guys, that's given their life to a particular job. And there's nothing wrong. We want to be committed. We want to be excellent. But when people, if that's all they're living for, when it comes to retirement, many times it could actually cause physical problems for people, but for sure it will cause emptiness in their life. Or for some people, it's their looks. And, you know, it's all about how they look. I don't know if you heard about the lady that was in a car accident, and she was in a hospital, and she's on her deathbed. And she cries out to God and asks God to heal her. And God responds, "Because of your faith, because you've called out to me, I'm going to give you 40 more years." So while she's on a mend in a hospital, she decides to have a facelift and a tummy tuck and all the other procedures that gives her a fresh look and a new look. She's finally discharged from the hospital, and she leaves the hospital, she crosses the street, and she's hit by a car and killed instantly. And when she stands before God, she asks, "God, what's up? I thought you said I was going to have another 40 years. God says, "Man, I'm really sorry. I didn't recognize you." Now, I didn't say my jokes were theologically correct. But, you know, for some people, it's all about maintaining a certain look. Okay, it's all about, you know, looking a certain way. And I remember years ago, I'm giving my age away, I mean, many years ago, when I was youth pastor here at Church of the Cross, we used to bring in concerts before anybody else was bringing concerts in at the Civic Center. And because I was the youth pastor, I was asked to be the MC. So we brought these two individuals in, and they were very well known at the time. One of them just kind of dropped off the chart, but the one was Michael Card. I don't know if you're ever familiar with him, just a tremendous man of God. And it was my job to talk with them before, in their dressing room, get a little information on them, and then introduce them to everybody at the Civic Center. So I go back to the first guy, and I walk in. I kid you not, he opens the door, and he just stands in front of the mirror the whole time. Whole time he's just brushing his hair, looking, and he's talking to me, and I'm wanting to really throw up, to be honest with you. This guy was so into himself. "Hey, man, check this out. Do I look okay? Is my hair fine? Do I have any lint on me?" It was just all about how he looked. And so I left there and went to Michael Card's room. And Michael, he opened the door and said, hey, brother, come on in, man. He said, I was just getting ready to pray. Would you join me in prayer that God's presence would just be all over this place? And I'll never forget, we knelt in his dressing room and just prayed and just asked God to bless that service. And, one guy, his whole thing was, about his looks. The other guy was all about God. And for some people, it's all about their looks or trying to maintain a tan or working out all the time or whatever that is, shopping for clothes. And it's all about how they look. And there's nothing wrong with those things. Don't get me wrong. Don't hear me. Don't start throwing stuff at me right now. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that. We want to present ourselves well. We want to take care of ourselves. And right now I'm working with a personal trainer a couple days a week, trying to get myself in shape and to take care of my body. But here's the deal. If our life focus is trying to preserve this life, trying to preserve this body, we're going to be greatly disappointed, because I don't care how many Botox shots you have. I don't care, how many vitamins you take. Your body is going to wear out at some point, and we're going to pass from this life to the next. I remember talking to somebody here a couple months ago, and they were really from the hyper-faith movement, and they were, coming at me with, like, every prayer should be answered, every single person should be healed, we should be seeing people raised from the dead. And I'm all about seeing God move in a great way. But this person was just way off the chart, and I kind of baited them. I said, kind of like Lazarus in the New Testament. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Lazarus, seeing Lazarus come back from the dead. That's what we need to be seeing all through the churches. I said, have you seen Lazarus lately? I said, the guy's dead. I said, there's a point in this life when we pass from this life to the next. And if our whole focus is trying to preserve our life and all about how we look, we're going to be in for a disappointment. And so for some people, it's what other people think of them. And you need that certain home, that certain look, that certain job to impress people, because your whole life is all about what other people think. And I used to be there. And here's the thing, when you hear about somebody that you interpret that doesn't think too highly of you, or they're not impressed with you, that will rock your world, because your whole image, your whole mission in life is to try to impress people with how you look, how you conduct yourself, and everything. And so that will rock your world. And then for other people, sometimes they're going to live their life around their children. Everything revolves around their children. All their free time, their vacations, even their meals. Okay? What do I mean by that? I remember there used to be a day and time when the parents set the meal. Today, man, so often it revolves around, what does little Johnny or little Mary want? I remember growing up, man, my mom would just announce, hey, we're having liver and onions tonight. Your father wants it. I know you don't like liver and onions. If you don't like it, you can have an extra scoop of mashed potatoes. That was it, And so often we're telling the kids, man, it's all about you. What do you want to eat for dinner tonight? And again, I'm kind of going down a bunny path, but so often we have people that live their lives around their children. And children should be a central part of our life. There's no question about that. But when they become the sun that our life revolves around, that's when it becomes, we get into trouble. Because there's been people that have lived their lives around, that I know, that have lived their lives around their kids. And their kids move on, they get married, they move out of state, and all of a sudden, that couple, they don't know what to do with themselves. Or they're devastated because their whole life is centered around their children. Or their children move away and they haven't done anything together. Everything's been about that child. And all of a sudden they recognize they're living with a stranger because they've grown apart, because it's all about the kids and they've neglected their own relationship. I've seen actually people go to get a divorce because they've lived their lives around their kids. The challenge is these things are good things. Man, we want to do excellent. We want to, do well at our job. We want to look well. We want our kids to be a part of our life. But here's the deal. They're going to be involved in our life mission, but they can't be our life mission. Because God has a life mission for us. And when we miss that, guess what? Other people are going to miss that around us, and it's going to leave us with an empty feeling. And I want to challenge you today that God has a life mission for you, and that all other things revolve around. As you begin these next 4 weeks to really embrace what God has for you, I guarantee you that other things are going to align in your life and really come into a line. You know, our mission statement here at Church of the Cross is love God, love others, and serve the world. And for the next 4 weeks, we don't want to just talk about it, but we want to equip you and give you the opportunity to walk that out. And today we're going to be talking about the importance of connecting with people that are far from God. And then coming weeks, we're going to be talking about the importance of serving people that are far from God. And you've heard this quote before, that people will never care how much you know until they know how much you care. And we're going to be talking about that. And, you know, we've got a beautiful spirit here at Church of the Cross that wants to make a difference in the lives of those around us. But for some of us, maybe we have a hard time having that conversation with other people about God. Well, through this series, we're going to equip you to be able to have those conversations with those people around you. Jesus, in a very simple way, laid out the mission that he has for us. Matthew 28, verse 19, it says, "Therefore, go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit." You and I are called to be a part of God's rescue plan for mankind. We are commanded to really share with others what God has done in our lives. And so how do we do that? How do we practically go about doing that? Well, here's the first thing is, do not underestimate your influence. Do not underestimate your influence. Well, how does influence work in our lives? Well, can you imagine just a total stranger calling you up or coming to your door and say, "Hey, listen, I have a great idea for you to become a millionaire. Here's what I need you to do. I need you to take a second mortgage out and give me that money. You can trust me, man. Just get a second mortgage out and give me the money." Hopefully nobody would do that here today. Or suppose you're a young lady and somebody comes up to you and said, "Hey, listen, I've got the perfect person that you should spend the rest of your life with, my cousin Vinny. Okay, and I've already lined up a blind date with you and him for this coming Friday, which will be a special day in his life because that's the first day he's released from prison. He's been in prison for 10 years. You can trust me, he's the one for you." Are you going to do that? Obviously not. You know, when it comes to things that matter in our life, our finances, our relational lives, and our futures, we don't usually put ourselves in the hands of total strangers. Friends influence friends. And the same thing really applies to people's spiritual lives as well. If we're going to reach people for Christ, for the most part, they're not going to be reached by strangers. For the most part, they're not going to be reached by television evangelists. For the most part, they're not going to be reached by Christian radio. Let me just take a poll here. How many of you are following Jesus Christ today because of a TV evangelist? I'm not slamming them. How many here today? TV evangelist. Trying to look. Okay. How about a Christian radio? Anybody here? Okay, we got 1, 2. Okay. How many here because of the influence of a friend? I mean, look around, folks. That's how God has designed us to reach this culture. It's through connections, through friends. This is a pattern that goes back to the New Testament. I want us to look at several passages in the book of Acts. And there's one word that you're going to see weave through all these passages, and that's the word household. In Acts 16, verse 14 and 15, it says, "One of those listening to Paul on a missionary journey was a woman named Lydda, a dealer in purple cloth from the city of Thyatira, who was a worshiper of God. The Lord opened her heart to respond to Paul's message. When she and the members of her household were baptized, she invited us to her home. 'If you consider me a believer of the Lord,' she said, 'come and stay at my house.' And she persuaded us." Then a little time later in the chapter in Acts 16, verse 31, Paul and Silas, if you remember the story, they're in jail. And through just really a miracle of God, they could leave the jail, but they chose to stay in their jail cell because they knew the jailer, if they escaped, would be killed because they would have escaped on his watch. And when he saw that they stayed out of consideration for him, he asked them, "What must I do to be saved?" And verse 31, "Believe in the Lord Jesus, and you'll be saved, you and your household." Then verse 33, "At that hour of the night, the jailer took them, washed their wounds. Then immediately he and all his family were baptized, the jailer brought them into his house. And then in Acts 18:7 says, then Paul left the synagogue and went to next door to the house of Titus Justus, a worshiper of God, Crispus, the synagogue ruler, and his entire household believed in the Lord, and many of the Corinthians who heard it believed and were baptized. And that word is weaving all through their household. The gospel is spread through household. And now household in the New Testament is different. It's not the same as what we think of household today. When we think of household today, we think of parents and we think of children. Household in the early church included extended family, servants, slave. It would include people that they were connected with through family ties, economic ties, business ties, vocational ties, and what we would call today as networks. That was households back then. Circles of people whom you worked with, you played with, you lived with, you did business with. And that's how the gospel was spread. The kingdom of God, for the most part, is not spread by a preacher speaking to a large group of unconnected strangers. There are isolated cases that happens, but that's not the typical. Who listens to Christian radio? Christians do. Who reads Christian authors and Christian books? Christians do. I just read an article 2 weeks ago, and hear me, I am all for all these Christian movies that are coming out. It's good to be able to go to a movie theater and watch a wholesome movie. But here's this article coming out, and they've done some studies. Well, guess who's going to see those Christian movies? Christians are going to see them. It's not really affecting our culture. And that's not to be negative, but that to me drives home the point that God has given you and I the responsibility to reach our culture, to reach those people that God has placed into our lives, that we can't count on Christian Hollywood producers. We can't count on the TV evangelists. We can't count on somebody writing a book that's going to reach the masses. God is looking to you and I to be his hands and feet. And comes by somebody experiencing a life-giving message of Jesus. It's transforming their life, and they can't contain it. And they reach out and they tell their network of friends, the people that they are connected with, about Jesus. And that's how the gospel is spread. That's how it was spread 2,000 years ago. That's how it's spread today. And so first thing is, do not underestimate your influence. Here's the second thing is, and Jesus lays it out very beautifully in Luke 15, we need God's compassion. Luke 15, verse 1 and 2 says, the tax collectors and sinners all came to listen to Jesus, but the Pharisees and the teachers of law began to complain. Look, this man welcomes sinners and even eats with them. Jesus had the tax collectors and sinners gathering around him. And this is huge. They were not running from him. They were running to him. They were not avoiding him. They weren't ignoring him. They weren't being hostile to him. The verse says they actually came to listen to Jesus. Well, why were people that were far from God, why were people that were sinners eager to listen to Jesus? Well, it certainly wasn't because he watered down his message and just had a message that tickled people's ears. He didn't compromise. It wasn't like Jesus said, hey, listen, everything that you do, man, is acceptable to us. No, he didn't do that. Why did lost people, why did people far from God run to him? I really believe it's his compassion. Jesus loved them and showed them that love with compassion rather than a condemning type of attitude or spirit. The Bible says this in verse 2, that Jesus welcomes sinners and eats with them. One of the definitions from the Greek word translated welcome in that verse means to receive as a friend. This was Jesus' attitude towards those who were lost. Jesus welcomed them. He was compassionate and accepting. And despite their faults, despite their sins, he was a friend and not a foe. Jesus had an attitude that people were attracted to. He was a magnet. And for us as individuals and as a church to even have a greater impact, we need to make sure that we have that type of attitude, that same DNA, and we take it into our neighborhood. We take that into our jobs, into our schools, into every influence that God has given us. You know, at a car accident scene, there's 3 different types of groups of people at any given car accident. You got the bystanders and the onlookers, man. They are just there. They're curious. They're watching things unfold. They're not involved. They're just watching. And then you've got the police officers. And their responsibility and their response is to investigate the cause of the accident, assign blame, so to speak, and give out the appropriate warnings and punishment if necessary. The third group is paramedics. They're the people that are usually the most welcomed on the accident scene. They could care less who was at fault in the accident. They don't give people lectures. Man, you should have stopped for that stop sign. They don't go there. Their responsibility is to help the hurting. And they'll bandage up wounds. They will free trapped people, and they'll give encouraging words. There's three groups. One is uninvolved. One is assigning blame, so to speak. And the other one is helping people. And when it comes to reaching lost and hurting people, we're in one of three of these areas. We're going to be, again, one of three of these areas. We're either going to be that person that's just stepping back and watching everybody else do it. We're not involved. We're just watching everything else unfold around us. Or we could be that person that's condemning, trying to assign blame, just say, hey, listen, man, that's a consequence of your action, man. If you live your life this way, you wouldn't be where you're at, man. You made your bed, you sleep in it. Or we could be concentrating on helping people that are hurting and sharing the life-giving message of Jesus Christ. And folks, we need to be that last group. And I just want to, and you know this, man, we are living in some very dark times. We are in a moral free-for-all. I mean, we are just going off the cliff morally. And it's very easy for us to step back, become cynical, judgmental, or even apathetic. And you know what? We need to be concerned with the direction our nation is going. But I want to challenge you not to become cynical, judgmental, or apathetic. But this is a time to let our light shine. We could either curse the darkness, or we can be a light in the midst of darkness. And I want to challenge us to take the life-giving message of Jesus Christ and take it and share it with those people that need it the most, the people that are hurting around us. Here's the third thing that we need to do for reaching the lost. It's going to take effort. It's going to take initiative. Luke 15:3-5 says this. Then Jesus told them this story. Suppose one of you has 100 sheep but loses one of them. Then he will leave the other 99 sheep in the open field and go out and look for the lost sheep until he finds it. And when he finds it, he happily puts it on his shoulder and goes home. You know, many years ago, when my son David was 1.5 years old, and for those of you who may be new, David is our worship leader here, we had kind of a scary incident happen in our family. One afternoon, I was home on my day off, and my wife was home. My two older sons were at school, and at that time, we lived out east. We had like 3.5 acres between my house and my mom's house next door. I used to take care of all the outdoor work between the two homes. So this day, I was going outside to work. Karen was cleaning the house and doing laundry in the garage, and we put David down for a nap. Then it came time for us to wake him up from his nap and have lunch, so I came in. We went into his bedroom, and he's not in the bed. And so, you know, we didn't panic. We recognized there's times when he went and crawled into one of his brother's beds or even our bed. And so we went into the other bedrooms to look in the beds. There's no David. And now all of a sudden, we grow frantic. I run outside because our lot, and David has in the past wandered out of the house. I'm looking, next door is a wooded lot with a pond on it, which is dangerous, obviously. And then at the back of our property is this deep ditch with water in it. Again, dangerous spot. I'm frantically running around my house screaming David's name out. Karen is tearing the inside of the house up looking for David. At that point, our love for David compelled us to take the initiative and do whatever it takes to find David, including running room to room, including looking like an idiot running around my house yelling for my son outside. And never did it cross my mind to look at Karen and say, hey, Karen, listen, why don't you just get back to work doing the laundry? I won't get back out cutting grass. We've got 2 other kids. You know, it's going to actually be cheaper this way. You know, don't have to worry about college. You don't have to worry about food or clothing for David. We're good. Got two. 2 out of 3 is not bad, babe. No, that never crossed our mind because David mattered. That one child mattered. He mattered enough that we're going to do whatever it takes to find him. And eventually, after it seemed like eternity, which was probably only about maybe 5 or 6 minutes, we found David. He was underneath his bed in the corner, curled up, sleeping, oblivious to us searching for him. Didn't know that we aged 10 years as a result of that. But here's the point. It took effort to find David. And it's going to take that same kind of diligent seeking for us to reach our friends, our family members, our coworkers. You know, in our Christian lives and in the church, sometimes it seems like we do the opposite. We tend to wait for the lost to come to us. And we're tempted to kind of be passive instead of active. We're waiting for them to come to Christ rather than bringing them to Christ. And it's a temptation that we all face. And that's why we need to make the effort. And that's why we need to take the initiative to reach out to people around us. Reach out to those that we are connected with. Well, you know, we have Easter coming up. And statistics show 90% of people would accept an invite to come to church if somebody would just simply ask them. That's 9 out of 10 invites people say yes to. But you know what we need to do? We need to do the invite. We need to take the initiative to invite our friends. And so in the next coming weeks, we're going to give you some invite cards. But here's what I'm asking you to do today. If you could pull out in your bulletin a card that says Life on Mission. And I'm asking you to take the initiative today, that you'd sign your name. You could just put your first name on there. And we're going to stop and we're going to pray a moment and ask the Holy Spirit to bring people faces in our minds, drop names in our heart of people that we need to ask to be at our Easter service. And I promise you, we will do a service that will give a simple message of hope for people. And I promise you, we'll do our part if you do your part. But I want to encourage you to take this, and what we're going to do in a few moments, we're going to take communion. And I'm asking you, symbolically, to bring this card with your friend's name on it, and bring it right up here and drop it in this basket, right in front of the cross, like you're bringing your friends by faith to Jesus. And every Thursday, as an elder board, we're going to pray over these names. So I just want you to know we're going to be praying every single Thursday for the names that you write. And we're going to be praying that God would give you a holy boldness to invite them. And you know what? If they say no, that's okay. You just simply be obedient. Maybe it takes a couple invites for people to come, but I want to encourage you to be obedient to what God is calling you to do. Now, here's a second action step, and that is to mark on your calendar April 28th, and that's when we're doing Touch Manatee outreach, and that's going to be from 9 a.m. to 12. And what we want to do is sow seeds of the love of Christ throughout our community. So we're going to be presenting to you in the next week or 2 weeks, in the next 2 weeks, I should say, opportunities for you to sign up and be a part of a multitude of outreaches, whatever kind of fits your niche. We're going to have a group of people that will be out at the beach handing out free bottles of water with an invite to our service. We're going to have people painting houses. We're going to be doing an Easter egg hunt here for the local families here in our community, and many more outreaches. So I just want to encourage you to mark your calendar.